Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to H2O Post Party with Water Think Tank. And Water Think Tank is a platform that we have created to have a space to explore, discuss past experiences, current approaches, innovations, and future needs related to water ecosystem. And today in H2O Post Party, we're going to have a chat, a candid conversation on desalination. Is it a solution or is it a problem? So today with me, I have Raja. Hi Raja, how are you?
Hi. Good, good. How are you?
Yes, nice. Raja is actually part of Water Think Tank, and he's a researcher in his own right and a consultant. And together with us, we have Anthony. Anthony is from Found System Network. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Punita. Hi, Raja. Nice to see you.
Yes. So thank you, Anthony, for joining us. And Anthony is actually coming all the way from Jordan, and he's from States. And the interesting thing is, when I was reading and searching about desalination, I came across Anthony's video on desalination, which I shared in our group. And what really made me interested in this particular video is it is sort of like a dummy 101 for those who knows desalination but do not really want to do their own research, because he have really done the precursor research and shared with us bits on technology and bits on environment. So it's really like a thought through aspects of desalination. And one key thing I find that a lot of the information out there are more related to technology but not really linking it to the impact. So that really excited me when I watched your video, Anthony. And
Thank you.
Anthony is a founder for the startup of Found System Network, and he's focusing on low carbon innovation for industrial wastewater treatment.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, welcome, Anthony. So really, like, what really got us thinking about desalination is we noticed that desalination is not really a new technology. There are 16,000 desalination plants all over. Some are large and some are micro plants. But it seems like becoming a solution that being favored by everyone globally. So I really beginning to wonder whether is this a quick fix solution or is it something that really can solve the problem of water scarcity without affecting environment. What your guys take on that?
Do you want me to start? I think it is in the context of global water stress. When you talk about water scarcity or we talk about water stress, we're we're we are trying to maintain a degree of economic viability, a degree of health, of human dignity, as it pertains to access to water. And global water stress isn't just about domestic uses like drinking water or cooking or laundry, but it extends out into society, out through industry and to agriculture as well. And I think desalination is a solution because it's kind of a turnkey solution and it's reliable and it's predictable. And I think that makes it something that engages with systems of finance, is that reliability and that predictability. But I don't think seawater desalination is a solution for all forms of water stress. I think water stress is, while it gets talked about as a global problem, I think it manifests itself locally in specific ways. And I think the solutions also need to address very specific ways to reduce stress. So I'll use an example of in inland areas, for example, in Rajasthan, in India, which is conventionally understood as kind of a desert climate. It's obviously inland, so access to the sea for purposes of seawater desalination is not an option. And as I understand it, the water table has been getting lower and lower as people pump water for a variety of uses. The solution there that I find very interesting is in some villages, people are terraforming along the topography. And what that terraforming is doing, it's encouraging the retention of rainwater on the land. And what they're finding, and this has been going on, I can't give you any specific dates. I want to say for 10, 20 years, some villages have been pursuing that in cooperation with local not-for-profits. And they're having success raising the water table. So that might be the indicator that water stress is being alleviated in these specific areas. So the solutions, the problems of water stress are local, and the solutions are local as well. I think where seawater desalination is concerned is so many human beings live near the ocean now and on the coast, that becomes a viable technological fix to relieve water stress in coastal areas. I could keep going, but I don't want to take up the whole conversation. So.
I think the whole idea of which led people to consider seawater desalination is that you're living close to the sea. There's so much water, but then this water is not drinkable. So we have along the time, as we go on time, technology is being developed and things like that. And from a technological standpoint, desalination doesn't seem like something that is so damaging, because you're pumping it's energy intensive, and up till recently people don't look at energy intensive processes as being environmentally unfriendly. And you're pumping something from the ocean and you're putting back whatever you don't need into the ocean. So I guess in a way, that's why desalination is not looked as something that is potentially nasty for the environment. What do you think?
I think the nastiness is piped away from where the people would see it, and that would be the brine. And there are carbon dioxide emissions associated with the energy that goes into seawater desalination. And we know how abstract a problem carbon dioxide emissions is, as to communicate as a problem. And it's taken really society a long time to see it as something to respond to and do something about. And I would argue that the weather changes are really something visible and tangible that a lot of people who don't have that training in the abstract kind of awareness of CO2 and atmospheric chemistry can relate to now because of weather. People understand weather. So yes, the access to the sea, it's right there. I think the appeal of it, I've never been involved with planning or implementing or financing a desalination project, but I think the water stress puts pressure on local leaders, governments, business owners to mitigate that risk. And I think a lot of people are actually planning ahead on that. So I could give you an example, like in Egypt, they're really planning ahead, and we can get into more detail there. And there are transnational companies like Veolia and Suez, for example, that are there. They have the expertise, the experience, the capacity to implement these large scale public works, and it becomes something predictable, like a turnkey kind of process. And so the solution is right there for municipalities and business owners and local leaders to really just secure the financing and hire these companies to engineer, build. And there are different kind of contracts there. Sometimes they'll own and operate it, but we don't need to get into that. But so I think that's part of it too. I think that reverse osmosis specifically has been, I think it was innovative back in the 50s or 60s. I don't know when those first patents are, but it's been a long time in the works. And now they've got it so a decent size seawater reverse osmosis facility, they're producing water for potable water for $1 a cubic meter, $1.50 a cubic meter. And you can just kind of look at that cost and you can compare that to other things in your life. And it's a very good value. I mean, it's so efficient. And I've seen there's one gentleman on Facebook, Leon Auerbuch, and he's a big promoter of seawater desalination. And he's one of the kind of pioneers of the tech itself. He holds many patents in reverse osmosis. And so he posts a lot of relevant information on new desalination projects. And some of these newer facilities, they're receiving tenders for 50 cents a cubic meter. So I think that tells me that the reliability, the predictability, the expertise is developed, And I think there's some very low interest rates going into the financing of these utilities now to get those kind of numbers. So I would anticipate that eventually, when interest rates start to increase again, I don't know when that'll be, 5 years from now or 10 years from now. I would expect those rates to actually tick up a little bit, but it does go to show you how competitive that is. I mean, that let's compare it to your a bottle of water. I mean, this is a really extreme example. I don't know what you pay in Malaysia or Kuala Lumpur for a bottled water, but a liter of bottled water in the United States, just in the plastic bottle, they will go for anywhere from, if you're buying it at the grocery store, like a warehouse store, for 50 cents, and then at a gas station up to $2, $2.50. And if you look at a cubic meter of water and you're getting that cubic meter of water for such little money, it's highly competitive. And then you look at the value. What do you get for that cubic meter?
Yeah.
A household of 4 people, depending on where you live, can use that for domestic purposes for at least a day, if not 2 days. I mean, a cubic meter is 1,000 liters or about 265 gallons. It's tremendous value. I'll just leave it at that. So I think that's one reason we see so much uptake now.
In Malaysia, just to pick up where you mentioned it can cost 50 cents for a liter. Over here, it'll be 25 cents per liter in the plastic bottle. And it's really cheap, and water coming from the tap, it's heavily subsidized. Our electricity is subsidized. So yeah, it's really not good for you.
It's tough to compare. It's tough to compare because you have to be able to benchmark it against something, which is why I kind of left it with, household uses, like a cubic meter of water. What's the value you get out of that cubic meter of water? So.
But if we look, if we just retrace our steps back, something that Raja was saying earlier regarding, the abundance of that source. So that's just waiting to be tapped, right? I guess probably 100, 150 years ago, this is the same thought that humans had when they started just putting up sewers and dumping it directly to the rivers, assuming that rivers will have limitless capacity receiving all this municipal waste. So, there's nothing to worry about. And of course, down the line, I think in 1900s, things have changed. The moment plague started setting in and all those things, they decided, no, you have to put sewers, but you also have to put up the treatment plant for it, right? I think similarly, when it comes to ocean, I think right now it's being treated as something that I can take whatever I want from the ocean and dump whatever I do not need back to the ocean, and it'll be fine. But the question is how long and what is the impact? If I look at some of the numbers, it seems like for every 1 liter of clean water, it produces 1.5 liter of brine. Right? And then brine seems to also have copper and chlorine in it as part of the treatment. That means it's not just bringing salt back, but it's also bringing these chemicals into the ocean. And I'm unable to find any agencies or even government or international agencies coming up with a benchmark to say something like carbon footprint. So how much capacity each country have, because ocean is a resource that every single country in the world shares, right? So if it's not like if you use it in Saudi and dump it in the Saudi's ocean, it's going to remain there. It's going to be everywhere. So I don't see such thought has been put into place. What is the capacity each country has that this is what you can take and this is what you can dump back? So the reason why I'm thinking about this is one of the video that we have shared before this conversation on desalination. It shows that like US, the water consumption is 570 over liters per capita per day, compared to another country which could barely be 20 liters per capita per day. So for countries where they have such low consumption because of scarcity, desalination makes sense. But seems like in other countries, it's just inability of the government or the agency of the people to control their consumption. So just taking up the resources, right? So my biggest concern about desalination is not the cause of the direct cause of the desalination. I think
Mm.
direct cause of the desalination is a price that people have to pay for wanting to have desalination, but
Mhm.
that indirect cost to the environment,
Mhm.
right? So I think, and we can't find much information on that. Couple of studies a friend have shared, Alvin, he have appeared in our program before. He's from the marine side, shows that currently studies are being done, but we do not know the extent of that studies. What is the
Mhm.
results? Unless
Mhm.
Raja or yourself, Anthony, have any knowledge about impact to the environment or something that you
Uh,
came across.
I have something to say because only recently I had a conversation with Professor Nick Mariam. She was my supervisor when I did masters. My masters was on membrane separation, so I've had a little bit of exposure on ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis. And our take is that the sustainability, the topic and the subject of sustainability has so far been something of an elite club, until recently. So not many people want to share. Everyone wants to sound special and intellect and highly genius, So and up until recently, no one wanted to paint a picture that is easily consumable by the general public. Before this, right in the afternoon, I was thinking about today's show, and I did a quick search, and there are a couple of papers that are doing exactly like what we're talking about. They did a side by side life cycle analysis or comparing seawater desalination and other technologies. But then
Mhm.
again, unless you are a practitioner of the LCA, you're not going to make much sense from those studies. So this is
Mhm.
what I mean. The information is there, but there should be a
Mhm.
bridge that would make these studies accessible and
Mhm.
understandable by the general
Mhm.
public.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Brine in particular is I, I I I think it's very difficult to have a person who can't read an LCA, a life cycle analysis, or who doesn't usually think about environmental impacts that are remote. I think it's tough to communicate the value of that, why someone should care or why someone should um, change something of their behavior in order to reduce impact. Even still, I believe, and I think Raja, I think you're kind of pointing to this, and I think you are too, also Punita. There's a lack of information about the impacts of brine in the aquatic environments, and maybe there are some university oceanography or ocean biology programs that are out there researching that. And if they are, I would be interested in seeing the results of that. So you kind of need you need to know what the impacts are before you would even need to know what to communicate. It appears to me from where we're sitting right now, there's just a general awareness that there are risks and there are probably impacts that we don't know about. And so we need more information. We're kind of, driving in the dark with this. I think the demands for the water are so great that it's kind of build now and see what the impacts are later. Having said that, I think in California, for example, I think the permitting of seawater desalination facilities in California, I think they do get really bogged down on environmental impacts. So probably there is some local knowledge and expertise in certain areas of the world, but I would expect that in other areas it's not looked at. I don't know.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
it's like a huge limitation in that particular segment because a lot of
Mm.
conversation when it comes to desalination. Of course, because you have done your video in a very balanced way, right? But a lot of this conversation seems to be like um, very technology oriented. I'm
Mm.
solving even the CNBC video that I shared. If you notice that, well, there was a question asked by the reporter. I'm not quoting verbatim here, something about the impact of the brine, and the
Mm.
response was, well, it solves water scarcity problem. The person is asking about impact of the brine, but the answer was,
Mm.
yes, it solves water scarcity problem. That was a very clear
Mm.
indication how much left unsaid when come to this particular segment. I
Mm.
understand for countries like, for example, Saudi Arabia, right? Because first, I think their water consumption is pretty decent, about 200 something per capita per day, per person per day. But when come to countries like Malaysia, I mean, there were conversation in Malaysia where there was an interest, or seems like they think the solution is actually to have um, desalination. So I really wonder whether that is that necessary. Malaysia is a country, I think we have about 250 to 3,000 milliliters of rainfall a day, a year. So I mean, it seems like lack of prioritization. How do you prioritize to say that this is your first option, second option of doing things, and then moving towards that? And my biggest concern is when desalination is being sold as you will never have shortage of water because I'm tapping from the ocean, right? Because this is the mindset. I don't know, Raja. Probably I'm not sure whether Raja is for desalination, but I'm not against desalination. But I really feel that it shouldn't be the first option to be
You
sold.
know, I'm a chemical engineer by profession. So when you take an engineering kind of perception, it's always, we don't look as a problem, as something that you know, it's not always a problem. It's just something that you need to handle. So the way I see it, if you talk about desalination, it people will, you know, you can generalize it by the energy. There's an issue with the energy, and there's an issue with the brine, and there's an issue with or rather it's addressing an issue of source. Like for Malaysia, in Malaysia, we have a lot of fresh water, right? We have rivers, we have groundwater. So maybe for us desalination doesn't make much sense, but you know, just across the river, or do you call it a river? That's in Singapore. They don't have much choice. They need to consider desalination, or even in smaller sites in Malaysia, like some islands off of Penang. They're using. I was made to believe that they do have smaller plants of desalination. So for us, if you ask me whether I'm for or against desalination, I would say that, you know, if you're in front of the ocean, I would say you should consider desalination. But if you are at a large enough capacity that the brine will cause problems, that's when you should settle the brine problem, right? And if you're worried about sustainability, and you are concerned about carbon footprint, I think you shouldn't make a monster out of desalination just because it is energy intensive, because there are other energy intensive industries that get away with it. You know, just the energy. Don't blame desalination, right? Get cleaner form of electricity. What do you think, Anthony?
I think Panita is asking exactly the right question. Now, I don't know what projects are planned in Malaysia, but for those situations where seawater desalination facilities are kind of immediately arrived at without looking at the broader array of solutions, I think that is problematic, because it probably should be lower down on the priority where there are other solutions available. Maybe they're less convenient, though. I'll use an example of Israel, for example. They went through a process, and I don't have the actual reference here right now. This is something I read about a year ago. They went through a process where they really planned their society's water use, and they used a deliberate communications campaign, and they managed to create carrots and sticks, like incentives and punishments, to get people to reduce their water usage. And that was like the first phase of this plan. There's like this whole national water plan. And then they looked at having some jurisdiction over surface and groundwater sources, and managing that and licensing access to that appropriately. And then they built the reverse osmosis facilities there. So I think, Punita, that what the question you're asking is really along that lines. Is there a way to prioritize a response to water stress that doesn't immediately go for the big infrastructure project?
Yeah. Like one of the thoughts that I had when looking at brine as well as abstraction from the ocean, right? some of the conversation was they were discussing on how the seawater being abstracted, because it takes it also brings in all these um, organisms, marine lives that actually get sucked into the plant, and they need to filter it out, which means that they are destroying it. And another part of it is the heat that is generated being dumped back to the ocean. And when I look at the numbers that has been presented, the ocean actually handles 30% of carbon dioxide, global carbon dioxide, and which actually reduces the heat by 90%. By dumping all this thing back into the ocean, is going to increase the ocean temperature, depletes the dissolved oxygen, affects the marine organism. And we have seen in our previous program in sea piracy, even though some of it is a bit Hollywood, but a lot of factual content when talking about how the impact when one organism, marine organism, is affected, and how does it spill over to other marine organism that depends on this. So this is like, I guess, when we talk about sustainability, it seems like we are very short-sighted. I mean, the sustainability seems to be designed to a point where it's convenient. Beyond that, I don't really want to think, because there is no solution for it. Like, so far, I do not know, I could be wrong. Seems like Brian do not have a solution yet. They don't have a solution yet. So unless someone really thirsty and they don't have a drop of water, I think not in Malaysia. In Malaysia, we should create sponge cities. I mean, because the rainfall that we're getting, and we're getting everywhere. This is not like a country where you have three climates across the region. Such a small country. Singapore makes sense, yes, but Singapore only use their desalination plants when they are short of water. So the plants doesn't run all the time. It's not like the plant is running all the time and producing. So they only use it when it's necessary. We have one of our industry expert, Datuk Kade. I'm not sure whether Datuk Kade is ready. If he's ready, we can bring up on stage. He have a couple of points that he would like to raise. So let's bring Datuk Kade. Hi, Datuk. How are you?
I'm on. Fine. Thank you.
Yeah,
I've been
Datuk Kade is
listening.
actually Datuk Kade is actually industry expert in Malaysia, and also globally, because he's actively participate in the conversation related to water sector, wastewater technology, and he has been leading the sector for a fair bit of time, even now. So, Datuk, what is your take?
Actually, my take on this, we got to look at the source in general. Before you talk about desalination, you got to look at what you have. It's just like when you go shopping, what's in your pocket? What is in your pocket? What is the available that you have to spend in what you want to do? So in that sense, what I'm trying to say is, you got to look what is the source available. So I can put it in a list. There are about 7 sources of water. One is when the drain drops, it goes into the surface water. Number 1 is surface water. Second is the dams, ponds, retention pond, what do you call it? Anything that you damped, that's another source. Third is the groundwater. Fourth is the recycled water from everywhere. Currently in Malaysia, we have about 5,000 MLD being discharged into the surface water. So the next one is the rainwater harvesting. The 6th one is the AWG, air water generator. I think I was told that, Stephen, you have developed one from the solar panel. So that's one of the ways. Last option, number 7 is desalination. So you got to consider the number 1, 2, 3, 4, but you shouldn't be use 1, then you go 2. No, it should be an integrated. If I may say that, if you have an integrated water supply system, you may do away with the water operator supply. Take example, if you incorporate the groundwater coupled with the rainwater, that can be used for your non-potable example, and the air water generator can use for drinking. I use this analogy. A person needs water to drink, maximum 5 liter. Maximum 5 liter. So if you look at the household, you have 5. What you need is only 25. in Malaysia, average, I would say 200 liter per capita per day. In fact, you only need 5 liter. So 195 is what is portable and non-portable. So if you look at that per se, you only need about 25 liter per capita and per household. And that 25 can be supplied by the air water generator, or like what you're producing, Stephen, you know. And then the balance can use the rainwater. You can couple with the groundwater for the flushing system, for your washing and all these things. Basically, when there's no water, what you need is drink. The most water used is for the toilet. When you flush, it goes into the sewage system. Create a sewage system that can recycle water that is for your irrigation. So the water supply from the operator is a standby. No more main cost already. By that, the capex will be a bit high, but long term, the return of investment is there, and you are independent. Whenever there's any water interruption, you don't bother because you have water, and air water generator is free. It's free. So I started to create this integrated water supply system because I feel sad. The incident happened in Selangor, one of the states in Malaysia. It closed the clinics. When it closed the clinics, then the patient have nowhere to go. So this is where I look at it. This is crazy, you know. The people need the clinic, and then because of no water, they cannot go and get treatment. So by that, coming back to desalination, I hear you clearly, Stephen, talking about 50 cents per meter cube. I guess that's US. The best price that you can get for desalination water is about 2.6 ringgit. That has not gone into selling, just production. Of course, they have to make profit about 2.5, 2.6, quite easy. But I guess the big challenge is not is where do you get the source from? Is it by the energy, or is it by gas? And our energy cost here increase almost every year. This is where the water operator get robbed. I say robbed, meaning that when it's not synchronized. When the energy sector increase, the water sector remain. There has been thought about pass-through cost, but it has never happened. So whenever the energy cost increase, the water operators suffer. They cry. The energy laughing all the way to the bank, if I may say so, but the water operator is crying every day. And it's still happening. So like what Raja is saying, whatever that you do is all about affordability. Our water rate is not truly a water rate. So the human behavior, when it's cheap, then they start to waste. So that is indicated by the consumption level in Penang, having the lowest rate in Malaysia. The water usage is very high. It's more than 200. Some state, I think, can reach about 300. I'll put your average about 200. We are targeting to about 170 in the future. But that is still too high to me. So the wastage is there. I agree that what is lacking here, as what you say, is education and awareness. So when you hit their pocket, then they will have the pinch and they start saving. So we are not in desperate because we have what Panita was saying. We have ample supply of rainwater, and we are not in water stress area. What is lacking is the poor management of trying to contain the water rather than let it flow into the sea, and combined with your problem of brine. So that's the concern. What's happening in Malaysia? I guess if you look at the globally, the Middle East, they have no choice. I've been in the Middle East. I am sort of asking you just now in Jordan, but in Saudi, when I stayed in Tabuk, and I asked the owner, I stayed in the hotel. He pulled me out and stayed in his camp in the desert, and surprisingly, he dug a well up to 2 kilometers deep. Oof. And he created a pond, and we have a dinner in the middle of the pond, and he reared fish. So what I'm trying to say here, he has to go down up to 2 kilometers to pump water out from the groundwater. So it's an act of desperado because they have no water, they have no rain, and they don't build any proper drainage. Whenever it rains, it floods. That's what happened in the Makkah. So it's about back to what I say about 7 taps just now. If they have a choice. I wouldn't say that they want to use desalination water. And God has given them a blessing that they have a lot of oil. So their oil is cheap. So that compensate with the liquid. So that's why they can have a very cheap what they call rates in using desalination water. And they also waste. They also waste because it become a culture. So you have to create a habit. That habit become a culture. So until that happens, the future generation will suffer, and that's what happened in Malaysia. We have got good water, it's been polluted, and the enforcement is weak, and the governance, I would say, in short, is not there. So what you have, you waste, and you want to build some more. So thereby you build more dams, and you submerge a lot of inundate a lot of settlements, and the so-called the orang asal, or the aborigines, not aborigines, I wouldn't say aborigines, the old people who stayed in the forest have to move away. And these are the what called dilemma that we have until we have a good driver. Then I think this will be taken up. Because when I say good driver, sorry to take some time on this, Punita, I have to say this. When Klang River and Kallang River, Klang River is in Klang and Kallang River in Singapore, they started off at the same time. But you look what happened to Singapore now. The Kallang River is now water catchment, and you have this Marina Barrage. If you find two fishing poles, you can one get the fresh water, the other one is salt water fish. If you just hold like that, so you got two type of fish. And in a matter of fact, over the time, more than 10 years ago or 20 years ago, Singapore now is whole of Singapore is water catchment, and our Klang River remain a Klang River. They put up the River of Life. Sad to say, I think it's failed. You beautify at night, but daytime is still ugly. You have all this the Malay called play tarik. You got the Nest Cafe, and the smell you cannot. So you have the beauty by the makeup, but when you approach, you cannot eliminate the smell. So in fact, I think it is in a way it's not total success. I did put a challenge to the minister. I say if you can meet the challenge, there's a mosque in the confluence of the two rivers. I give a challenge to the minister. I told him, if you really want to get a success story of KPI that you have made, a person can ride a boat from Port Klang and do his prayer every Friday by using boat to the mosque at the confluence of two rivers. Then you achieve. So you look at the success story of Amsterdam, and you look at the Menam Chao Praya. Menam Chao Praya is not, considered a developed country, but how they make use of river as transportation, and you build all the jams. So it's about how you make use of water. The water is there, but go back to management. I think I stop at that, Punita. If I can talk, then I steal the show from Stephen and Raja. So
Yeah,
that's the point. Whole spectrum. Yep,
understand your frustration. So it's good to hear it, because it does address one of the Facebook user. Ismail actually has posted here in the Facebook. So Ismail, you see, this is what, no, summing up what you say, right? This is what it
Yep.
is. We have frequent water crisis, but the frequent water crisis is due to pollution. So it's addressing the pollution. This is what I'm getting. I was trying to get at earlier, because I feel like desalination is becoming, lack of a better word, for certain countries, is a lazy man solution. For lack of a better word, for some countries, without a doubt, there's a need for it. But despite that, like what Dato was sharing, for example, recently the flash floods in Middle East, right? So when you have those kind of floods, I mean, there's no mechanism even to capture that water, unlike what has been done in Singapore. So I think there's a lot of solutions that can be brought in before touching another source that we do not know what is the impact as much. So this is the biggest concern when it comes to desalination, or I feel like so many people are talking about the impact of COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, we're not going to go on that, but you have vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, because they say that it's not well tested. But why the same kind of thought processes are not there when it comes to water sector? People are so worried about vaccine, right? I mean, some of them are questioning the efficacy of this vaccine. But why the same questions are not being asked when it comes to desalination, and it becoming such an easy solution? just because we do not want to address pollution, number one. We do not want to address other kind of aspects like sponge city, or even, for example, in Malaysia context. In Malaysia, we have 12,000 over public and private sewage treatment plant lying all over the country. And literally every single sewage treatment plant should be treated as water storage to be reclaimed. But why that is not being explored? So these are the concerns that I have, because I just wonder why it is so attractive. Why desalination is so attractive? What makes it so sexy that to bring it? Is it that we are more concerned on showcasing the technologies we have rather than the outcome that we want? And let's take a couple of questions here. We have one Facebook user posted up. Brine disposal can be troublesome for desalination, as it cannot be discharged into surface of water body. How it could be safely disposed? Uh, I don't know. From my reading, I think there's no such thing as safely disposed, but it can be disposed with lesser impact if you dump it further into the ocean, I guess. Right?
I would affirm that actually. On the reading I did on environmental impacts, I think where they are trying to take responsibility for brine discharges, I think they do a survey of the outfall area, and they're looking for ocean currents, and they're looking for areas that are not, I don't know, on migratory routes for migratory fish species. They're in areas that are less environmentally sensitive for some species. And so if they can combine the ocean water flow with a less sensitive area, and they can locate their discharge there, I think the general idea is that they'll mitigate the impacts from brine by doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
I just have a thought. Maybe when you look at desalination as a small RO facility, it is not, it does not appear to be so damaging, as opposed to having a full-fledged, large facility doing a large a volume of MLD per, millions of liters per day. It can be an option for smaller facilities that are scattered over, and you don't have a large discharge of brine going into the ocean in a volume that could actually affect the ecosystem. I think that can be a more feasible solution. Perhaps, I don't know.
Raja, do you want to answer that question that's on the page right now?
Oh, okay. Going back to this here. All right.
This
Basically,
one is actually from Dr. Mokzaini. Thank you, Doctor, for posing this question. I don't know, Raja. What do you say?
well, basically, what's happening is you're taking water from the sea and taking the portion of seawater and using the part that you need and putting back the parts that you don't need, right? So it's a little
I
bit
think,
difficult to
I,
answer.
I think in terms of the volume of water, it never changes,
Yeah.
right? Because it's mass transfer. It's just that once your abstract get used and it may be discharged elsewhere. In terms of volume, it doesn't change. But I think what happens here is more on the, I mean, in the river we use the concept of total maximum daily load, right? That means the concentration, the loading gets the concentration in the same liter gets higher. I mean, that's what's
Yeah,
happening
it's
here.
more concentrated. I think
Yeah.
if you talk about Raja would know the chemical things there, but it's talking about the total dissolved solid. So it can be as high as 36,000 milligram per liter, and once you have recovered, it can goes up maybe up to 70,000 milligram per liter. So it's to the layman language, it gets saltier because it's concentrated. So just like the salt water, it's not that normal salt water. You can't even, if you swim in the at the beach, you can still swim, but if you have brine, you cannot do that. So
You will float.
yes, exactly. So fortunate Malaysia, we I mean our largest plant, if I may, if I can know, is about 1 to 2 liter MLD only of the plant. We have no large plant. So as such, to talk about the desalination plant in Malaysia, I would say we are not in position. What we can have is a reference from overseas. I have some figures overseas, roughly over the world. It's about 7,500 desalination plant, and 60% is in Middle East, 12% in the USA, and the balance spread out in India and things like that. So if you are talking about the context of Malaysia, do we need it? It goes back to the 7 steps. We may need, but I think if we manage our water well, we don't need it because we consider a country that wastes water quite a lot, and we use quite a lot of water, and we waste quite a lot. So when we only know that we waste whenever the drought season comes in. So for a short period, after that you forgot again and you start wasting again. So it goes in life cycle, and it goes in every year in out of that perception. They always forget when the rain comes and they say no more. So I guess if really we really need it, it may goes to the remote island. Remote islands such as Pulau Sepadan, something like that, very remote. You can use, but then again, I go back to the facts of life. You need water to drink, to consume, and one person can only consume about 5 liters, including what you want to do your cooking, whatever. It's only 5 liters. So 1,000 liter per household, you need only 25 liter per day. So talking about 975 liter of non-potable water. Why you need potable water? So this is the thing that I think it goes back to education, how to educate and put people on awareness and to value water. So
if I could add to this, I think that industry is really a key user of water. Industrial users are extracting a lot of water from the ground. They use it for industrial purposes. Maybe they're pre-treating it, and then they're probably discharging it back into the environment. And so it seems to me that as part of a water management strategy, industry appears to be, and this is happening in Europe for sure, and in the United States, the companies are making the right kind of statements. They're really looking at relying less on groundwater abstraction, and they're looking much more at closed loop systems within the manufacturing, so that they bring a degree of water treatment in-house. And they're doing this already, but they're kind of pre-treating it and discharging it in many cases, or they pre-treat it and then they put it in the municipal sewer system. There's a move, and I think this will probably be confined to the larger companies, where they're really working on more of a closed loop approach to their water usage for manufacturing purposes. I'd be interested in hearing how intense the usage is in Malaysia, for example. I think you have some microchip foundries in Malaysia, and boy, they're big water users, for example.
Yep, I visited a plant that was that has a deionized, a very large deionized water facility. They're dumping their the retentate water, like, you know, they're really just dumping it like that without any treatment, and no one understands what's happening, because as long as you meet the discharge limits, then they just dump it. And really this is large facilities that without education, without the proper education, and you know, they are not in the limelight, and that's how they want it. I think they don't want people to understand what's going on. I've seen industries that have set up near rivers and things like that, and they use water. They use groundwater, like you say, sometimes not for processes that actually cause much change in the characteristics, but then they're doing that, then they're putting it back, then, you know.
Right.
Yep. So it's happening.
I do notice that there are significant improvement in desalination. Having said, I mean, the challenges on the output, right? The byproduct is a problem that I guess still being. I do not know how much effort is being put in place to address the byproduct issue, but I know a lot of effort being put in place in the technology itself to make it less energy intensive. I think that pretty much has been done. So I just feel like if enough pressure is put on desalination designers or manufacturers, I'm very sure solution for the byproduct will appear. Because right now the solution for, because I feel like uh, anything that goes back or being dumped into the environment, you do not have an advocate. That is the problem. When come to
Right.
energy, there's an advocate. Dato Kadir earlier shared how the energy cost is going up. So that means the cost of treatment is going up. And if the tariff goes up or people have to pay higher due to that energy, there's a pressure for them to look into finding a solution to reduce the energy for that particular process. But not when come to the byproduct. So I feel like if we can put or we can bring these idea to international organization that doing plenty of work when it comes to carbon footprint and water footprint, something must be done to say that how much each country is, what is the number assigned for each country before they dump it back into the nature. And I'm very sure we will find a use for brine. So I agree with what Raja said. There will be a solution. It's just that we are yet to see that solution. And I really, really hope that countries that do not need desalination just don't take it as a showpiece project, because that's what happened to mostly when it comes to engineers, right? I don't know. I mean, Dato is an engineer,
Yeah,
myself, Raja, Anthony is also, even though not an engineer, but technical background. So we know that
still in the
engineers love,
family.
yes, does.
No, you're right, Raja and Punita. One day there will be solution, especially for the business people who look at the business angle. One day the membrane will be beaten up by some other technology. Graphene is already now on board. It's being tested. So we talk about graphene that one day may replace membrane. If there's any scientists here with us, I put up a challenge, not a challenge, give you some access. Study from the fish. Anyone, I mean, all of you have eaten fish before. Does the fish taste salty? So doesn't, right? So you don't have to remove the salt from the fish. You have to put the salt, in fact, when you cook. So there is a system developed by the fish to desalinate and consume. So if you can find that technology in the fish, then you find a way in eliminating the salt. And the footprint is movable. You know, the fish swim everywhere. So it's a mobile treatment plant by itself. So moving around in the sea. So if you look
Okay.
at the fish, study the fish, and you find an answer to the brine. So the fish doesn't produce brine. So study the fish. I'm giving tips to the scientists to look
That
more.
that sounds like bioengineering here.
Then if you look at treatment,
Biomimicry.
yeah, if you look at treatment, in the olden days, sewage is being discharged into the sea using this long outfall, and it dispersed. When it dispersed, the bacteria died. It become plankton, things like that. So if you look at that, one day the sewage system can also be treated at smaller footprint by using the salt. So maybe the brine can be a solution to sewage treatment process. You just need a thinker like Raja Sharin. You can look at the business side, develop this, because brine, roughly, if you look at concentration, is about twice of the seawater. So you know about that what we call ratio. If people want to ask how does brine taste, it's about twice of the seawater concentration. So then you can have a visualization of how it is. If you take the brine and use it for sewage treatment plant, maybe that will a solve problem for the bacteria or the reactor to operate. So there's two tips for the business people, for the scientists who like to do to put more people on the PhD, and for the business people who want to explore business, look at these two areas. Because about 20 years ago, there was a magnetic process in treatment, but it doesn't go far because nobody explore further using magnetic to treat sewage treatment plant. It's looking at iron, the negative and positive ion. But I guess look back at the nature, how God created the sea. So the sea, the fish, I repeat, is not salty. So they have their own system. And you look at the alternates of how they treat sewage, they throw into the sea. So if you take the double dosage of seawater put into sewage system, I think Raja, you can become billionaire. Okay, I put that. Okay.
So I remember that, Dato. But I think I want to also tell Punita lah. I think we should, going back on what has been discussed so far the last 50 minutes, I think I'd like to propose we put something into our position paper. It is to trivialize this knowledge of sustainability and carbon emissions in a way that, you know, it should be something that everyone can understand, right? So we should make it, you know, put it into the education system in a way that it's something of a norm. Because not too long ago, I used to teach in the chemical engineering department in University of Malaya as a tutor, but not too long ago, we are still looking at reverse osmosis as something of an advanced treatment, you know. So it would not be strange for an engineer to go and say, look, you're in front of the ocean. This is a wonderful high technology that you should just take, and, you know, you can take salt water and magically make it drinkable. So people don't think about the environmental impacts or the carbon emissions that are coming from it. You know, I was involved with the Department of Environment in since about 2009. And we were going around trying to educate the public on climate change and global warming. You know, the things that the scenarios that I have been in, trying to tell people the effects of carbon dioxide, you know, having to put an analogy of nasty gases and you know how they make, you know, explain it to a 5-year-old kind of thing. Yeah, and yeah, I really feel that it all starts with education, and with the proper understanding, people can make more informed decisions. And it's not that people are deliberately wanting to well, most people anyway, they're not deliberately wanting to destroy the environment. It's just that they don't understand. My take
Let's
anyway.
take a couple of thanks, Raja. Let's take a couple of comments from the viewers. Here we have Mr. Ismail. Yeah, I think he's agreeing what I think most of us have mentioned, right? We were talking about the water management strategy. There are plenty of options, and then really like it should be case to case basis rather than pushing a technology, but really like designing a technology to suit an area. So thank you, Mr. Ismail. We have another Facebook user. I'm sorry, unless you allow StreamYard access to your profile, we will not be able to see your name. So let's see. We have another comment here. I understand that as frequent water crisis in Malaysia is due to pollution. Oh, I think yes. This is by Mr. Ismail. Thank you very much. I agree with Dato' Kadir. Desalination should be the last option. Currently in Malaysia, we are not maximizing the usage of available raw water. I think this is the same probably with many countries who's also using desalination. The reason why I say that is there are 177 countries using desalination approach to get water supply. So it makes me wonder, when you talk about water scarcity, there are not as many countries as 177. But in terms of using desalination, there are as many as 177. That clearly shows that some of them are opting for desalination for probably other reasons. So that is something that really need to be looked at. Is it because other approaches are becoming so complex because it requires integration, requires a lot of conversation with various agencies and government departments to make it happen? So just like instead of communicating the diplomatic process, I would rather just stand alone and do desalination. I think this is something that really, yeah. Yes, Anthony.
I would put out there that it's probably very difficult for a city or a town with a big manufacturer in it, or with very established farmers with a lot of land. It's probably very difficult to get them to change their business models and to change the way they've been doing things for very long periods of time. You would probably find across all of those countries, again, the water stress is very local. I would expect you would find that if there are planning efforts and multi-party agreements that are attempted, you probably have some powerful interests that don't want to change their ways, and municipalities that need to provide water to households who are really kind of at the bottom of the hierarchy, or households, I think.
Yes.
They're going to put in the seawater desalination facility to help the households.
Yes. Yeah, right. So I think those are the unique challenges that require non-technology approach to solve.
Yeah, I mean, it's policy. Punita, you were talking about the ocean, and you brought this up twice, and I didn't want to kind of leave it unaddressed, but I think you're bringing up a very good question about discharge of brine into the ocean. And I keep thinking about fisheries and how much effort goes into diplomacy and multilateral agreements about the rights to the access of the ocean for fisheries purposes. And I would expect that there's a kind of an existing framework of cooperation about using the oceans as a resource. That might be the pathway or an entry to beginning a dialogue about how much brine impact can an individual company put on its adjoining sea. I think it's a question worth having, and it would be an interesting pursuit to explore. I'm sure people are thinking about it.
Yeah, but it's too the consequences of having something that will disrupt their current practices, like you mentioned earlier, is too great, I think. So they'd rather not talk about it. For example, just near where you live, right? If you start talking about how much brine can be put back in the Red Sea, I think a lot of people would jump at it. They would say, okay, you're in Egypt, you have the Nile, you can talk about this, but being in the Emirates, they don't have much choice, right? You don't want to be digging 2-kilometer holes behind your house just to get water, right? So yeah, it all goes back to the access to source, right? Like in Malaysia, we will not have, I think they will say, you don't have a right to say anything at all. You have plenty of water, right? So, if you're looking at putting back, developing multi-country kind of approach to developing frameworks on how much brine goes back, it's not going to be an easy task. It's going to be like the carbon emissions all over again.
Well, no easier than getting countries to obey fisheries laws. I think there's just a lot of people that just countries that flaunt treaties on fisheries. So I would imagine the politics are very similar.
Yep. Yeah, the challenge definitely will be there. It's not something that can be solved tomorrow or like in a year's time. But because knowing how private sector and R&D sector functions is, when the certain benchmark is being established, they will work towards bringing not just the carbon component of it, but the byproduct, how that can be addressed. Right. I mean, we always now when it comes to plastics sector, we are talking about extended producer responsibilities, the EPR. So similarly, if you have a desalination facility and we extend the responsibility to the byproduct that you create, and that is on the facility itself. But when we're talking about having a global benchmark or like giving certain rights or discharges or privileges, I would say, to dump it back in the environment, we're not talking about equal. I mean, can never be an equal, but it must be equitable. A country like Malaysia likely will have far lower numbers compared to a country like Singapore or a country like Saudi Arabia, or landlocked countries that do not have rivers passing through, or they're really depending on other rivers to allow other countries to allow the river pass through. So I think these are the ideas. I do hope something that we can suggest or put up and have some international agencies take some responsibility and start driving it before it becomes too late.
Sorry. Well, as much as they're developing carbon markets now, maybe 100 years from now, there'll be brine markets.
Oh, yes. I hope not, but yes, it might.
So we should buy brine credits early.
Buy them early, yes. I don't know what the mechanisms are for because carbon can actually be sequestered and returned, removed from the atmosphere through natural or industrial processes. And then there's avoided carbon. I'm not sure that brine works the same way, but maybe it's a useful metaphor.
Can
Okay,
I
I
pull
just
back
want
to
to
the
bring up. I
pull back
just
to the
want to bring
question?
up a. Yes, Dato.
Sorry,
Please.
I was looking at the tagline today. Desalination, is it a solution or a problem? Actually, that's why I got on board on this panel, because I want to pose a question, or is it answer, I don't know. But in Malaysian context, it is a solution and it is a problem. It is a solution for some remote areas, and it's last resort to use desalination plant, but it is a problem because of that brine, and the high energy consumption is a problem to the consumer because question of affordability. So way forward is, I always say to the local universities, for those who want to get PhD, there must be a coordinator so that the whatever R&D, your project paper must be centered at the demand of the industry, not at the one that in Malay terms, Stephen, sorry, I have to say in Malay, not a project that is short scenery. That means you're doing a project to satisfy your needs. It's not about your needs, it's about the industry needs, it's the national needs. So if that is being what we call guided properly, you will get many R&D projects. So this brine can be one of. So you become a leader, even though you are not the having the largest desalination plant in Malaysia, but you become a leader in providing solution. Look at Singapore, they don't have the raw, but they get the raw and they produce something. I think I told the minister about this. We have the raw water, and we sell to Singapore, and we buying treated water from them. So I think it's funny, after being independent for 64 years, we are selling raw water and we are buying treated water. So likewise, you can turn around. You look at the environmental solution. We have many universities now. Every state have their own universities in general. So every of the university can take up one project that can solve all this environmental problem. I think they get a win-win situation. At the end of the day, they get their PhD, and the environment or the national challenges get a solution, and those PhD person can live with that project to become the what they call the driver to look further, because R&D is not a full stop. It will go version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The desalination is only one version, maybe version 1. So when you look at brine, it can be used. One of the solution of brine is to solve the problems in sewage treatment plant, because it double up the saline level. And if you look at desalination plant, there is an attempt now to generate own energy, because I use high pressure, so you can recover back energy. So it goes back to the circular economy. So look in perspective of that, and that if that is become cheaper, then you have a raw water supply from the sea. So you forget about the rain. So people must look at that manner. So it's not about thinking outside the box. We must now thinking without the box. So it's not about the box anymore. It's without the box. So when you throw away the box, then you can go into the universe. That is limitless. That's my thought. Okay.
Dato, I just want to, let's wrap it up in a couple of minutes. So I
Okay.
will just, yeah, I think taking from Dato's points, right, I can see two things. Number one is, again and again, Dato have talked about PhD. I think the larger context is research and development, because there seems to be like significant lack of after 16,000 over facilities, but there's significant lack of understanding of the byproduct and what it can be used and how it can be used. So I think that is key thing, because I think just like in Malaysia, globally, there seems to be lack of interest in science, technology sector, research and development in science and technology sector. That's one part of it. Second part of it is, I always want to go back to the need to be in touch with reality, in a sense that any decisions that is being made, because they do not want to collaborate, they do not want to communicate and take the diplomatic route, they opt for a solution that they do not have to discuss with anyone, which is desalination in Malaysia context, end up you have to make public pay a higher price. So I think that is a significantly high price to pay by current generation in terms of tariff, future generation in terms of environment. So I do hope that when they actually select a technology solution, it's not just on based on a set of problem they have, but a set of solution they will have to see in couple of years down the line, because that solution will be something will be there for 50 years, and somebody have to pay for it. So I do hope they bring in this kind of context, economic context, rather than purely looking into a technology solution. I mean, Anthony, Raja, before we end the program, do you have something to say, something to add, suggestion?
Anthony, you want to go first?
On the question, I think it's good to kind of wrap up with the original question: is seawater desalination a problem or a solution? And I would just really finish by going back to where I started in the context of water stress and climate change. And if you look at the projections for climate change, the wetter places are going to get wetter, the drier places are going to get drier, the hotter places are going to get hotter, and the colder places are going to get colder. And it's kind of scary if you're a water manager in an environment where the old patterns of resources are not going to be there. So I think that in the context of all of that unpredictability and increased risk to maintain dignity and quality of life and health, I think seawater desalination is a necessity. And I personally take comfort knowing that there's a mature, efficient, cost-effective technology that's available to us, in the environment that's coming.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Anthony.
For me, I think going back to the basics, as an engineer, it is always we should always approach things in context of what we have, of the resources that are available to us. I agree with Dato when he says, you have 7 resources available to you, and when you've exhausted, you are at least number 7. That's when you go for desalination. So again, this all goes back to education, and it all goes back to making the people that are responsible for making the decisions, they make informed decisions. So and they don't take shortcuts. For example, when a facility is being set up, you'd think that they would have done the environmental impact assessment. If the brine is being produced, for example, if the brine is being produced in a volume large enough that would affect the ecosystem, that should have been caught by the EIA. So I do have faith still in the system, and it's just that we should all be objective, and at the heart of it is still the sustainability and the education. People should be made aware. This should not be just for the select few, and the education system should be revamped. This should be taught in all levels, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rajan. Dato'.
Okay, I think all been said by Stephen and Raja. My short remark is we should be prepared for the next World War. Then water. So the climate is just part of it. So soon we'll be fighting for water, let alone all the petrol or whatever. So it's about water. So you must be prepared for the World War on all about water. So what you have to really save and not to take for granted. We are also a polluter by going into the toilets. That's one pollution already done from us, individual. That's an BOD load. Stephen is touched upon industry. I think I have to say something here. All the trade waste should change the policy for the trade waste, non-metal based to be discharged into the sewage system and go back to the. We have the law. Actually, the bylaw says only rainwater goes into the drain. So if that is strictly followed, you have a crystal clear water, like what you have in Europe. If everyone appreciate water, so all goes into the sewage system, and you have crystal clear water. And those who discharge, like the industry, we charge them by the BOD load. and those funds that we get will go into a ring fence fund that what being done is fund to be spent back to repair or maintain the river system. So it's self-generated revenue. We don't have to beg from the government. And as another part of the R&D, 1 cent of our bill goes to the R&D fund that to develop, as I say, study the fish and how the fish desalinated the water so that the body become tasteless. I mean, it's not salty. So you have to put salt in the salt seal, salt fish if you want. So study more in finding solution to the current environmental problem, and then you get a very cheap what they call solution, and that goes back to the consumer to pay a very cheap water rates. I have some formula for sewerage. Sewerage is free, can be free or nominal as well it is now, 8 ringgit per household, because I take it that all of us are the shareholders. By going to the toilet every morning, you are contributing to the black gold. So that can be contributed to something.
That will be a conversation that I'm definitely going to pick on for our people where Dato is going to appear and talk about water as a commodity. So that is definitely a conversation that we're going to have.
Because the vision of Malaysia, we were when I hope one day, Stephen, I'm still around. When you come to Malaysia, you couldn't find any sewage treatment plant. What you have is one green resource center, because whatever that goes out is dollars and cents. We sell the water, we sell the gas, and we sell the solid. And it's one green resource center. No more. It's not even water reclamation plant. It's one green resource center. So that's supposed to be the vision of nation. Thank you.
I think I'm coming back next year. So as soon as MCO is gone, we come back.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Dato. So I would like to wrap up. Back to the question of the topic of this program, whether desalination problem or solution. So one thing that we can agree on is desalination is a technology, means to an end. So really, whether we're going to make it a problem or solution is really in our own hands. And I would like to thank everyone, Raja, Dato' Kadir, and Anthony for joining the program today. And do visit Anthony's YouTube page, Found Network System, and he have plenty of resources. He have done the research for us, so it makes our life kind of easy if you want to go and of course you have to do your own research, but I guess he have make our life a bit easy. So do check out his YouTube page and his LinkedIn page. So with that, thank you everyone. Have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you, Punita. Thank you, Raja. Thank you, Dr. Kadir. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Terima kasih. Bye-bye.
Bye.